Chapter 91 The Interesting Colonel. You are listening at novelfull.audio. After a tense standoff, a Navy lieutenant commander approached. "Who are you?" he demanded. Charlotte eyed the major, who was chomping on a cigar. Something about him seemed familiar, then, a grin spread across Charlotte's face as he looked at the lieutenant commander. "Ha! You gonna try and stop me?" he asked, his voice dripping with disdain as he glanced at the surrounding sailors. Immediately, the crew behind Charlotte pulled out their weapons, mirroring his disdainful stares. The atmosphere crackled with tension. The major, too, drew his standard-issue saber and pointed it at Charlotte. "Who are you?" the lieutenant commander repeated, his voice strained. He could feel the pressure radiating from the man in front of him. "Ha! Who is he?" "A pirate, of course." Paul snapped impatiently. As soon as Paul spoke, the major shouted, "Trouble! Pirates! Prepare for a fight!" The surrounding Marines snapped to attention, their gazes hardening on Charlotte. "Pirate, release the girl!" the major yelled, stepping forward. "Ha ha ha!" Charlotte glanced at Elena, noticing a strange excitement in her eyes, an almost hopeful expression. Charlotte was momentarily speechless. Seriously? You're my woman now. Why are you looking forward to the Navy showing up? If they knew you were with me, you'd be dead. Despite the mental rant, Charlotte acted quickly. He set Elena down, but she immediately tried to bolt. He caught her wrist in a flash. "Ha! You think you can run? You're stuck with me for life." Charlotte whispered in her ear, pulling her close. Elena's face paled, and she stood there, stunned. The Navy soldiers had now surrounded Charlotte and his 20-plus crew members. "What's going on here?" a deep voice boomed from behind the Navy formation. The major hurried over. "Colonel! It's pirates! They've kidnapped a girl," he reported. "What? Pirates?" The colonel pushed through the circle to get a look at the pirates. He studied the leader, Charlotte, his brow furrowing. The pirate looked oddly familiar, like he'd seen him somewhere before. Meanwhile, Charlotte was still whispering to Elena, who was now trembling. The colonel racked his brain. The pirate holding the girl, he was sure he'd seen his face in a fax from naval headquarters. Recently, like maybe a month ago. That's it. Suddenly, it clicked. "You're the great swordsman, Rockefeller Charlotte. 1 billion bounty. That's you, Charlotte," he exclaimed, congratulating himself on his quick thinking. Then, he froze. T10. 1 billion, he stared at Charlotte in disbelief. Charlotte's face perfectly matched the bounty poster he'd seen. "You're the blood sword, the pirate Charlotte." The colonel shrieked, then, without another breath, he fainted and collapsed. "Colonel," the major rushed to his side, only to find him unconscious. "Colonel!" he yelled in panic. "Ha ha 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 ha!" Paul erupted in laughter, finding the colonel's dramatic feint hilarious. "Never seen a Navy guy fold like that before." "Ha ha 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 ha!" The rest of the crew lowered their weapons, joining in the laughter. Even Charlotte couldn't help but smirk. If the colonel hadn't recognized him, he would have wondered if his bounty poster was a fake. Since entering the Grand Line, very few people seemed to know who he was. "Colonel! Wake up! I can't make these decisions on my own." The major was practically in tears. Of all the times to pass out. "Now I'm stuck making the call." He frantically shook the colonel, but the colonel remained stubbornly unconscious. "I'm going to kill this subordinate." The colonel thought furiously. "I'm faking. Can't you tell? You're supposed to carry me away. What are you doing shaking me?" Charlotte, a master of observation, saw right through the charade. Pretending to faint. "How interesting." The colonel risked a quick peek in Charlotte's direction, and was horrified to see Charlotte watching him with amusement. "He knows." He subtly tugged at the major's pants. The major, still panicked, felt the tug and finally understood. An idea sparked in his mind. Quick! Get the colonel back to base. He's taken ill. The major shouted to the others. He hoisted the colonel onto his back and sprinted towards the naval base without looking back. The remaining sailors, confused, just stood there. They'd never heard of the colonel being sick. But some, quick-witted, followed the major. And then others followed them, not knowing what else to do. In a flash, all the Navy soldiers had vanished. The townspeople, witnessing this scene, slammed their windows shut and hid in their homes. Charlotte shook his head. That colonel's a natural. He should go into politics. He grabbed Elena's wrist and started towards the port. His crew, grinning, followed, weapons now stowed away. Elena, still in Charlotte's grip, was bewildered. She couldn't understand why the Navy had retreated and what was all that about 1 billion berries. And a blood sword? It was too much for her to process. Chapter 92 Suicide. You are listening at novelfull.audio. When they brought him aboard, she woke up instantly. The ship was leaving port. Charlotte released Irina. Elena knelt on the deck, staring blankly at the receding island. She was leaving the only home she'd ever known. Clap clap clap, star, tears welled up in Elena's eyes and spilled down her cheeks. Sobbing, Elena gazed at the distant island through her tears. Charlotte saw Elena's heartbreak and wanted to offer comfort, but words failed her. I forcibly dragged her from the only home she's ever known to wander with me. What can I even say? Sometimes, silence is best. Let her sort things out. Charlotte closed her eyes, standing behind Elena. The crew avoided looking at the girl in her maiden outfit. The ship was eerily silent, save for the girl's despairing cries. As the boat sailed further, Aska Island vanished. Only the vast ocean remained, and the girl's quiet sobs. Suddenly, "Boss!" She jumped overboard again. Paul yelled, horrified to see Elena sinking into the sea. Charlotte, who had been relaxing in a rocking chair, snapped to attention. Is she really that desperate? This is a first. Without hesitation, Charlotte dove into the ocean. Seeing Elena slowly sinking, Charlotte sighed. He swam quickly, grabbed Elena, and, ignoring her struggles, hauled her back to the surface. You bastard! Let me die! Just let me die! Elena, cradled in Charlotte's arms, pounded him with her fists. You idiot! You can't die! What about the baby you're carrying? If not for yourself, think about our child. Ignoring Elena's punches, Charlotte was careful not to squeeze her too tightly, worried about the pregnancy. They argued in the middle of the ocean. Paul and Isaac watched the scene from the ship's railing. What do you think the boss did to her? To drive her to suicide while pregnant? Paul asked, leaning on Isaac. Probably just being a pain, Isaac said with a shrug. Isaac held back from saying what he truly thought. It's outrageous, even for him. He already has so many women, and now this. His boss was skilled at everything. A swordsman at 20, with strength unmatched by all but a few in the world. He also treated his subordinates well, sharing rewards and teaching them his techniques. A boss like that was rare. They'd sailed for years, joining pirate crews and making names for themselves in the New World. Those names had earned them a spot in the Rock's pirates. Under Charlotte's command, they'd met plenty of people, but never a boss quite like Charlotte. The 8th team was the envy of many within the Rock's crew, yet, Charlotte wasn't recruiting, which disappointed many, especially aspiring swordsmen willing to pay for the chance to join. Charlotte's guaranteed monthly 50 Bailey salary was rare. Most pirates were broke. Without plunder, they'd starve. Stop it, Charlotte said sternly, holding Elena tight. With a small leap, Charlotte lifted Elena out of the water and onto the deck. Boss! Boss! Paul and Isaac quickly hid their amusement as their boss approached. Charlotte ignored them and carried the soaked Elena back to the cabin. To take care of Elena, Charlotte gave up his own room. He tried to put her on the bed, but Elena was drenched. With a sigh, Charlotte ripped off Elena's wet clothes. Ah! You pervert! Elena felt the chill and immediately covered herself. Charlotte, having removed the wet clothes, put Elena in the bed. then he sat at the table in the room. He couldn't let Elena out of his sight, or she'd do something rash. Liana, face flushed, hid under the covers. Charlotte poured a cup of hot water and took it to Elena's bedside. "Here. Sit up and drink this. It'll help warm you up," Charlotte said to Elena, who was still hiding. It was late October, but thankfully the temperature wasn't too cold, so Charlotte wasn't too worried about Elena catching a chill. It wasn't the first time Elena had jumped ship. They'd been sailing for a week, and this was her third attempt while he wasn't looking. If he hadn't reacted quickly, Irina would have been lost. One dead body, no two. Elena, hearing Charlotte's words, yelled from under the covers, "Get out!" Charlotte sighed, got up, and returned to his seat at the table. Elena, hearing the movement, peeked out from under the blanket. She looked at Charlotte's back. "Why did you try to kill yourself by jumping?" Charlotte asked without turning around. Elena, hearing Charlotte's voice, instinctively hid under the covers again. Seeing that Charlotte hadn't turned around, she breathed a sigh of relief. "You bastard! Take me back, now. I don't want to be at sea." Elena glared at Charlotte's back, gritting her teeth. "Ha! You can't go back. Like I said, accept your fate. Once you've become my woman and carry my child, you'll be mine forever. There's no escaping me," Charlotte said calmly, taking a sip of water without turning. Elena's eyes welled up instantly at his words. "You bastard! You devil!" Hearing Elena's anguished cry, Charlotte shook his head slightly. "Call me whatever you want. You're mine now. Don't even think about running. From now on, you're my woman, Charlotte's. Oh, and by the way, I have more than one." Charlotte turned to look at Elena. Elena's eyes widened in disbelief. Then, she grabbed the blanket and covered her head. "Wah!" He could hear her muffled sobs from inside. Chapter 93: The Changes Brought by the Seven-Star Sword. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Just cry. You'll feel better if you let it out, Charlotte said, her voice laced with a hint of helplessness. Elena was sobbing under the covers while Charlotte sat nearby, sipping tea and keeping an eye on her. After 3 solid hours of crying, Charlotte was beyond words. Is this woman made of water? She hadn't stopped crying. It was really starting to get on Charlotte's nerves. Bang. Charlotte slammed her glass down on the table. How long are you going to keep this up? Are you hungry or what? Charlotte glared at the lump under the blankets. Elena finally stopped crying, startled by Charlotte's outburst, but then she heard Charlotte ask about food, and her stomach immediately chimed in. Grumble. Elena, still hidden under the blanket, blushed. Leave me alone, Elena snapped, a little embarrassed. Ha! I heard that. Charlotte had definitely heard the stomach rumble. She got up, laughing, and left the room. Charlotte headed to the kitchen, grabbed some bread and milk, and headed back. All the while, she was keeping tabs on Elena with her observation hockey. She was worried she might try to jump overboard if left alone. Hey, you gotta be hungry after all that. Eat something. Charlotte brought the bread and milk to the bedside and spoke to Elena, who was still sniffling under the covers, but Elena didn't respond. If it weren't for the sound of Elena's stomach, Charlotte would have sworn she'd already run off. Ugh, Charlotte sighed, exasperated. Even if you don't care about yourself, think about the kid. What's done is done, so what's the point of carrying on? Just face reality. Charlotte left the food on the nightstand and walked out. She figured Elena wouldn't touch it while she was there. Click. The door closed. Once the room was quiet again, Elena peeked out. Her nose was running, her eyes were red, and she looked a mess. She stared at the door for a long moment, then touched her stomach, grabbed the food, and started devouring it. Charlotte, who had been watching everything with her hockey, smiled to herself. Now Charlotte's awesome observation hockey was basically being used as a nanny cam, keeping tabs on Elena 24/7. Feeling that Elena's emotional state was stable, Charlotte left the cabin. Boss! Boss! The busy crew members greeted her as she passed, and Charlotte just nodded and walked to the bow of the ship, staring out at the endless ocean. Charlotte was lost in thought. It had been 8 years since she'd arrived in the world of One Piece. She'd spent the first 5 years training like a maniac, never daring to slack off. In her 5th year, she joined the Rocks Pirates and began her own pirate adventure. That's when her love life exploded. She'd found 5 women who loved her, and she had a 2-year-old daughter and a 1-year-old son and another kid on the way. Come to think of it, the baby was due any day now, probably around the same time as the last one, and now Elena had a little life growing inside her as well. She had family and love all around. In terms of strength, the 20-year-old master swordsman had top-notch observation hockey, advanced armament hockey, and conqueror's hockey. Combine that with her insane physical strength and combat skills, and Charlotte wasn't afraid of anyone. In this world of One Piece, she was top tier, save for a few exceptions, but despite all of that, Charlotte felt a hollowness inside, like something was missing. Asterisk, is this what they call invincible loneliness? Asterisk, nah, no way. She knew her own limits. Rocks, the captain of the Rocks Pirates, Whitebeard Edward Newgate, commander of the 1st Division, and Shiki the Golden Lion, commander of the 2nd Division. Not to mention Vice Admiral Sengoku, Vice Admiral Garp, and General Kong, who were their equals in battle. Charlotte was no match for those guys, and don't forget Roger, Rayleigh, and the rest of the Roger Pirates. You couldn't call her invincible, but she could definitely hold her own. Feeling down, Charlotte threw her head back and roared at the sky. Arg! The crew members looked at Charlotte, puzzled. Then they saw a green long sword inexplicably appear in Charlotte's hand. Lightning crackled around the blade, and immense energy radiated from it. Arg! Charlotte raised the 7-star sword with both hands and swung it at the sea. What happened next would be etched in their minds forever. A beam of green sword energy shot into the sky, slicing through the ocean for miles. Asterisk gulp, star, everyone swallowed hard. Damn! The boss just keeps getting stronger. Paul and the other longtime crew members muttered. Charlotte was a little shocked herself. She knew her own power. When had she gotten so much stronger? Charlotte stared at the 7-star sword in her hand. Could it be you? Charlotte held up the sword, gazing at the Big Dipper design, and murmured to herself. The sword energy had been green, but she was pretty sure it was supposed to be white. Was the sword doing something to her? Charlotte activated her armament hockey, but it wasn't the usual black. It was a green-black, with a faint green layer over the black surface. The hockey quickly covered her entire body, and she stared at her reflection in the sea. She looked like a green man. No freakin' way. Charlotte couldn't believe what she was seeing. She frantically looked for a mirror. Sure enough, there was a light green sheen on the surface of her hockey. Damn it! Has the 7-star sword gone and changed me for good? Charlotte was reeling from all the changes, but she could feel it. Her armament hockey was stronger. More solid. It was like she'd skipped ahead several months of training. Usually, the best way to train armament hockey was to spar constantly, or find a few mountains and punch them into dust. When Charlotte had focused on her hockey before, she'd spent 3 months on an uninhabited island and smashed 4 mountains to smithereens. Training armament hockey was slow, so Charlotte hadn't been in a rush. She'd focused on her swordsmanship instead, but since becoming a master swordsman, she'd been slacking on her sword training and wanted to work on her hockey. Since it was her weak point, she'd put it off again to look for the 7-star sword. Chapter 94, The Red Earl's Highlight Moment. You are listening at novelfull.audio. But after grabbing the 7-star sword, she needed to level up her armament hockey. Pronto, with the Battle of God Valley looming, Charlotte felt the pressure. She needed to get stronger, fast. She let the hockey armor fade, revealing her striking features: golden hair, a statuesque build just shy of 6 feet, and a physique that screamed power. She definitely made an impression. Charlotte was pleased with what she saw. Body and soul, she was pretty much at the top of her game. Catching her reflection, she gave a quiet, satisfied smile. Paul and Isaac, who had been watching her, exchanged a look. 1 minute she's cutting loose with some earth-shattering sword swing that almost gave them a heart attack because they thought the Marines were attacking. Then she's just admiring herself in the mirror. When did their boss start acting like such a goofball? Were her newfound powers going to her head? Paul and Isaac couldn't help but worry. It was a beautiful day. Charlotte was lounging on the bow, enjoying the salty breeze. Standing beside her, looking less than thrilled, was Elena. It had been over 2 weeks since Elena jumped ship. Literally, now, she'd accepted her fate. Charlotte was keeping her on a tight leash. Even if she wanted to take another dive, it was impossible. The second she even looked like she was thinking about it, Charlotte would just casually drop a line about the baby and snap her out of it. It was infuriating. She'd only tried to off herself to get Charlotte to let her go, but Charlotte wasn't biting. So, stuck she was, standing next to Charlotte, she glared daggers. Meanwhile, Charlotte was engrossed in a week-old newspaper, actually, a month-old newspaper. She'd only gotten it from some lucky encounter. She was staring at a photo. Red Earl Patrick Redfield now had a bounty of 1,800,000,000 berries, and Charlotte couldn't help but chuckle every time she saw it. The article read: forcibly breaching the world government special route to the New World and slaughtering countless Marines and world government personnel, his crimes are heinous. Dead or alive? Charlotte didn't know what to make of it. Red Earl was obviously throwing a tantrum because Charlotte's bounty had overshadowed his. Now he was infamous, breaking into a world government passage and creating chaos in the New World. Not just anyone could pull that off. A month earlier, Red Earl stumbled onto a small island, looking pale and exhausted. He glanced at his new wanted poster, and a smile crept across his face. Ha! You can't keep me down. Just you wait. Once I master advanced armament hockey, we'll settle this. He muttered to himself, then tucked the poster away. He needed to find some food. The world government is not to be underestimated. He thought back to his stunt with the world government's special route. Because of his bounty, he was supposed to go through Fishman Island. But being one-upped by Charlotte didn't sit right with him. He decided to raise his profile by causing a ruckus with the world government. He targeted their special route to the New World. The moment he arrived, the Marines guarding the route spotted him. Their leader was a vice admiral. Red Earl didn't give him a second thought. A few quick strikes later, the vice admiral and all his men were dead. Red Earl didn't bat an eye. He continued down the passage. Everything seemed smooth, and he was about to get through. Then, powerful hockey signatures locked onto him. They weren't as strong as Charlotte's, but there were a lot of them. Instantly, Red Earl found himself fighting 5 masked figures. The moment the fight began, he knew who they were: the Celestial Dragon's Shield, CP0. Red Earl went all out. His lightning-fast swordsmanship overwhelmed them. They realized they were outmatched. A few of them surged forward, trying to overwhelm him. Under the relentless assault, Red Earl was struggling to keep up. He was starting to lose ground, but CP0 was having a hard time too. Red Earl's swordsmanship was a whirlwind of chaos. The fight dragged on and on. After a full day, Red Earl was getting desperate. He realized they were trying to wear him down. 2 of them were devil fruit users, making things even tougher. He decided to cut his losses. He created an opening with his sword, dove into the sea, and fled. As he swam away, he cursed, 5 against 1. No honor. Face me one-on-one. That he suddenly missed Charlotte, but quickly banished the thought. Seeing him jump into the sea, one of the CP0 agents started to pursue him, but another one stopped him. Let him loose in the New World. Let him fight the pirates. The leader of CP0 spoke with finality, then turned and left, leaving behind a battlefield littered with corpses. The remaining agents exchanged a look and followed. After jumping into the sea, Red Earl swam like crazy towards a ship in the distance. It seemed to be a merchant ship passing through the world government's route. He boarded the ship, quickly silenced the resistance, and everyone fell in line. He rested on the ship for a few days, recovering from his injuries, although his face remained pale. Finally, he stopped at a small island. Looking at his newly released wanted poster, he smiled. His little stunt had paid off. Cough, cough. He coughed, tossed the poster aside, and headed for the center of the island. He needed to rest for a few days. He wasn't in the mood to relax on board. His actions had infuriated the world government since its inception. No one had dared cause trouble at their doorstep. Red Earl was the first. Navy headquarters was just as furious. A vice admiral, even a branch vice admiral, had been killed just like that. Chapter 95 Locke's Call. You are listening at novelfull.audio. This Navy's the backbone, and not having a headquarters feels like a real blow. Then, just like that, Red Earl bit the dust. Reward. Crank up his bounty. Set it at $1,800,000,000. Cyborg Kong bellowed in his office, spitting mad. Kong's roar kicked off, and that bounty order blasted across the globe and the Grand Line. Folks were in shock, staring at the news. This guy dared to waltz into world government territory solo and smack them right at their front door. Report. Blood Sword has resurfaced. The Navy base on Aska Island says Charlotte's been spotted. A Navy messenger sprinted into Cyborg Kong's office, yelling the news. What? Charlotte, vanished for a month, pops up on Aska Island. Cyborg Kong was blindsided again. Yes, sir. Here's a photo Colonel Sadhu from the Aska Island base just uploaded. The messenger held out the photo from the colonel. Cyborg Kong instantly recognized Charlotte in the shot. Charlotte's got a girl in one hand, and she's fighting to get away. Right then, Kong remembered Charlotte's fondness for women. Then, thinking back to his intel, Charlotte's crew was practically a floating harem. Half the hands being powerless women pirates had picked up along the way. Thinking of Charlotte's reputation, Cyborg Kong blew a fuse. Damn it. That bloodthirsty creep. Imagining some young girl being forced by a pirate twisted Kong's gut. Find him. Scour the place. I want Charlotte's location, now. Cyborg Kong roared at the messenger. Yes, sir. The messenger, shaking in his boots, scrambled out of Kong's office. Seeing the messenger's hurried exit, Cyborg Kong sighed, drained. This was exhausting. He slumped into his chair and went back to the files. Bloop, bloop, star. Bloop, bloop, star. Charlotte, cranking out reps, heard the den mushy ringing. He ditched the barbell, wiped the sweat, and went to answer. He checked the caller ID and paused. It was Rox. He picked up anyway. Hey, Captain Rox, what's up? Charlotte asked. Wahahaha. Charlotte, you doing okay? Rox's voice boomed out of the snail. Charlotte frowned a little. Headed back now. What is it? Charlotte pressed. Wahahaha. Nothing, just checking in. It's been almost 3 months since you left Hive Island, not a single call. Forgot about your captain, did ya? Rox's laughter rang through the line. Impossible to read. Charlotte frowned. Captain Rox, you called just for that? Charlotte raised an eyebrow. Of course not. Just miss ya. You're my star player. Just a captain looking out for his crew. Rox leaned back on his throne, a nasty grin plastered on his face as he held the den mushy. Right. Well, I appreciate the concern. Anything else? Charlotte frowned. Wahahaha. Spot on. There is something else. But it's not your problem yet, maybe later. Might need you to step in then. Rox was being vague, and Charlotte was lost. What's going on? You got a plan? Charlotte wondered. Wahahaha. You don't need to know. Just know this, a huge war's coming, and it'll change the world, win or lose. Wahahaha. Rox's madness was palpable, even through the snail. War? Charlotte wondered. That's right, war. How long till you reach Hive Island? Rox asked. I'm almost at Sabaody now, should hit Beehive in about 2 months, Charlotte guessed. Good. Just wanted to make sure you were still kicking. That's it. Rox cackled and hung up. Click, star. Charlotte hung up the den mushy and started thinking. He didn't need a crystal ball to know Rox was talking about the God Valley incident. But what did Rox want from God Valley so badly that he'd start a war for it? After a while, he just couldn't figure it out. Charlotte sighed, then went back to the weights, hoping to be a little stronger when the storm hit Hive Island. Rox hung up, lost in thought. He wasn't worried about Charlotte running. Charlotte's wife and kid were still on Hive Island, and he didn't think Charlotte would ever abandon them. When Charlotte told Rox about their plan, Rox hadn't believed it at first. But then Charlotte only took a handful of crew. That's what calmed Rox down. After 3 years, Rox knew what made Charlotte tick. He'd never leave his wife. That's why Rox agreed to Charlotte's request. Rox reached behind his throne and pulled out a wooden box. Inside was a devil fruit. Haiten Muchan hid this devil fruit all this time. And finally came clean. Heh. Rox looked at the purple-red fruit and said softly. Someone. Rox barked into the empty hall. Captain. An old man in a suit walked in. Give this fruit to Haiten Muchan, and get the map in exchange. Rox tossed the box to the old man. Yes, sir. The old man caught it, bowed, and walked out. After he was gone, Rox sat back and let out a maniacal laugh. Wahahaha. Just wait. Just wait. Once I get my hands on it, this whole world will be mine. Wahahaha. The hall echoed with his laughter, on a deserted island. Sis, you think Rox will go for it? Haiten Chanwan asked anxiously. He will. For that thing, he has to. Right now, he's busy sniffing around. If he misses this chance, he'll be waiting another 40 years, but you think Rox will last that long? Haiten Muchan said confidently. Chapter 96 The Chambord Islands. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Alright. We're in Rox debt this time. Once we grab the fruit, we're ditching those Rox pirates and heading straight back to Wano. Haiten Muchan told his younger brother, Haiten Chanwan. Got it, sis. Haiten Chanwan replied with a nod. Charlotte, gazing at the dreamlike island, was also a bit awestruck. Wow! Is this the Chambord Islands? Elena, beside her, stared, hardly believing her eyes. It had been 3 days since Rox's last call. Now, Charlotte's ship had arrived at the Chambord Islands. They'd need to stay for a few days to apply a coating to the ship. Charlotte didn't mind. She'd promised the crew a 2-day break in the Chambord Islands so they could see the sights. A few days on the Soap Bubble Islands would be a good chance to relax. After all, they'd been at sea for nearly 2 months. Sure, they'd stopped at some islands along the way, but only to resupply. This trip had mostly been on the boat, so it was time for some downtime. Let's hit the island. Charlotte said, jumping off the boat as soon as it was docked. She glanced at the number on the tree, Island 8. She recalled the information about the Chambord Islands. The Chambord Islands, also known as the Soap Bubble Islands, were located just before the red line in the Grand Line. The islands were made up of giant mangrove trees with roots acting as the ground, from which bubbles constantly emerged. They were known as the Island of Failure and the Island of Starting Again. Near Navy headquarters, there was an algerman mangrove, the largest mangrove tree in the world. Because its roots were always exposed to water, the Chambord Islands were formed. The defining feature of the Chambord Islands was the special natural resin secreted by the roots of the algerman mangroves. This resin expanded with air, forming bubbles that floated into the sky. Because the bubbles were only suited to the climate of the algerman mangroves, they would explode as soon as they left the Chambord Islands. Bubble cars, bubble Ferris wheels, houses built on bubbles, bubble culture was everywhere. The whole island was composed of 79 trees, each with its own towns and facilities. The archipelago of these 79 islands was called the Chambord Archipelago. The regional division of the Chambord Islands was also clearly defined by the numbers on the trees, 1 to 29, primarily human trafficking shops, human auctions, illegal areas, etc. 30 to 39, mostly soap bubble parks, etc. 40 to 49, mainly sightseeing areas, specialty shops, etc. 50 to 59, primarily shipyards, coating craftsmen, etc. 60 to 69, mostly naval stations, government entrances and exits, etc. 70 to 79, mainly hotel streets and so on. As the only path to the New World, the islands drew pirates, merchants, and bounty hunters. There were a lot of human traffickers and bounty hunters buying and selling humans. Mermen and fishmen were openly traded. In a way, this island was depraved, but none of that mattered to Charlotte. As long as people didn't offend or annoy her, she wouldn't interfere. After Charlotte jumped off the boat, ladders were lowered. Elena walked down slowly, catching Charlotte's attention. "Beautiful lady. Would you do me the honor of allowing me to show you around the island?" Charlotte asked, bending slightly, placing one hand behind her back and extending the other towards Elena. Elena stared at Charlotte, surprised by her sudden change. What the heck, star? Humph. Elena scoffed, ignoring Charlotte and walking towards the center of the island. Charlotte's hand froze in midair. The moment was a little awkward, especially in front of her crew. Paul, Isaac, and the other 20-odd crew members wanted to laugh but didn't dare to, making them fidgety. Charlotte glared at them and quickly followed Elena. She couldn't let such a beautiful woman wander around this island alone. This was Island 8, an illegal area. What if she got snatched up? She hurried after her. "Elena. How about we go to Island 30? They have a special Chambord Islands treat there, soap bubbles," Charlotte said, trying to regain her composure. "Humph. Where I go is none of your business," Elena replied, turning and heading toward the center of Island 8. Charlotte's face fell. She glared at Paul, blaming him for docking at Island 8. Paul, following behind, was confused by Charlotte's glare. What's her problem, star? He and Isaac exchanged glances. Isaac shrugged, clueless. Charlotte rushed after Elena. Elena looked around curiously, clearly an outsider. Charlotte's watchful eye spotted that several people were already eyeing Elena. Her face darkened. She didn't want trouble, but it always seemed to find her. "Elena. We're being watched. Let's go. There's nothing to see here," Charlotte whispered to Elena. "Watched? No way. No way." Elena looked around hurriedly but saw no one staring at her. She was immediately angry. "You're probably the worst one here. You're the one who's been eyeing me." "Humph." Elena huffed, getting petty. Charlotte felt helpless. Elena was right. She was probably the worst one here. She smiled wryly and quickly followed. "Bro. They've spotted us." 3 or 4 men hid in the shadows, whispering to each other. "So what if they spotted us? What can a little kid do? That woman is fresh meat. Send her to the auction house, and she'll fetch a fortune." That the heavy-faced boss leered at Elena. His lackeys didn't dare speak. "Go. Follow them. Turns out we're not the only ones eyeing this prey. Our rivals are too." That the boss waved his hand, and they quietly followed. Charlotte was watching and overheard everything. Their words made her expression turn cold. They've just signed their death warrants. Star. Charlotte glanced at Paul behind her. Paul understood without a word. He quietly motioned to a few others, and they went to work. Isaac stayed with Charlotte. Chapter 97. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Elena, strolling ahead, had no idea she was being watched. She was just wandering around. "Auntie. What's so interesting here? Let's head over to Islands 30 through 40. That's where the fun is," Charlotte said, sticking close to Elena, wanting to keep her out of trouble. Honestly, with Charlotte around, Elena was pretty safe. But Charlotte was more worried about Elena getting a scare. Elena was almost 2 months pregnant, and a shock at this stage could be dangerous. If she had a miscarriage, Charlotte would lose it. Charlotte didn't mess around when it came to her family. "Humph." Elena huffed, acting annoyed with Charlotte. The more she was told not to stay, the more she wanted to. It was giving Charlotte a real headache. She had no choice but to trail after her aunt, playing bodyguard. First it was island number this, then island number that. After a while, Elena became interested in island number something else again. No matter how much Charlotte tried to reason with her, Elena would just give her a cold humph. It was starting to get on Charlotte's nerves. "Enough. Stop being so stubborn. You don't know this place. It's dangerous. It's not for you." Charlotte stopped Elena, her voice low but firm. "Dangerous? I don't know about that. Where? Where?" Elena just stared blankly, completely ignoring Charlotte, and started walking towards island number whatever. Charlotte just watched her go, feeling totally helpless. She couldn't force Elena back like she used to. She'd worked so hard to get her to relax. She didn't want to upset her now, especially not while she was pregnant. Paul and Isaac, who were guarding Charlotte, had been sent out to deal with anyone who looked like they had bad intentions. Seeing Elena heading on to island number blah blah, Charlotte sighed and followed. Keeping a low profile was clearly out of the question. If that was the case, they might as well just make a scene. Luckily, she'd already called for backup. Even surrounded by Navy headquarters types, she wasn't worried. With that thought in mind, Charlotte stopped trying to hide. She ripped off her fake beard, took off her bamboo hat, and hurried after Elena. "Hey! Where's your hat?" Elena asked, noticing Charlotte beside her. "You want to play? I'll play with you to the end," Charlotte said quietly, walking up to Elena. Then, ignoring her confused look, she headed straight for the center of the island. Elena stamped her foot and quickly followed. The two of them, a cool-looking man and a woman radiating maternal joy, immediately drew attention as they walked down the street. Some looked envious, some looked like they were waiting for something bad to happen, and some just looked plain mean. Charlotte noticed it all, taking it in with a cold expression. Elena, on the other hand, was happily looking around, trying to find something interesting. Born on Osaka Island, Elena's seen the small town there, but nowhere as bustling as the Chambord Islands. She was fascinated. She looked left and right, and whenever she found something she liked, she'd pull out some of the money she'd taken from Charlotte's room to pay for it. Charlotte was speechless. She's using my stuff, eating my food, spending my money, sleeping in my bed, and now she's showing it all off. And I have to put up with it. When did I become such a pushover? If it weren't for the baby, would she really be putting up with this? Charlotte was getting so worked up that she wished some random goons would show up so she could beat them up. Hurry! Let the Navy headquarters know that Rockefeller, the blood sword master, has shown up on island number something or other of the Chambord Islands. Charlotte and Elena's wild shopping spree on island number some number finally caught the Navy's attention, or rather, the attention of CP. These CP groups, hidden in the Chambord Islands, helped the world government gather intel. And they'd found Charlotte. The message was sent. Bang! What? Charlotte is in the Chambord Islands. Damn it! With the Navy headquarters spread thin around the world, and even GARP taking charge in the New World, HQ can't even send a single fighting force. Steelbones Kong was frustrated. The justice in his heart, his ideals, had finally lost out to reality. He glared, then sighed. The messenger was so scared he didn't dare to breathe, just standing there in front of Steelbones Kong, shaking. Go. Monitor the Chambord Islands. If anything happens, report it to me immediately. Steelbones Kong told the messenger. Yes, sir. The messenger jumped to attention, saluted, and left. As soon as he was outside, he breathed a sigh of relief. Every time he had to deliver a message to the general, he felt like he was going to have a heart attack. At this rate, who knew if he'd even make it to retirement? No. I need to talk to Lieutenant General He about a transfer. The messenger thought to himself. Steelbones Kong sat back down, looking helpless. All he could do now was hope that Charlotte wouldn't do anything stupid. Otherwise, he'd be the one taking the fall. Meanwhile, Charlotte and Elena were still strolling down the street, unaware of any of this. People were going about their business. Once in a while, someone would look up at them, surprised, but then quickly look away. Boring. Elena said, having walked around for a while and not finding anything that interested her. Charlotte couldn't help but chuckle. The real fun in the Chambord Islands is from islands 30 to 49. Those 20 islands are where it's at. Elena frowned and glared at Charlotte. Like I need you to tell me. She said, putting her hands on her hips and heading towards the islands Charlotte had mentioned. Charlotte smiled slightly, seeing how reluctant she sounded but how honestly she was following her suggestion. As the two of them headed for island number 30, they were noticed by a group of slave traders who had been watching them ever since Elena stepped onto island number whatever. They were waiting for the right moment to make their move, but if they didn't act now, it would be harder once they got to island number 30. Because there were naval soldiers stationed there, patrolling the area. It wouldn't be easy to kidnap them quietly. Chapter 98. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Damn it. I missed them. Let's go. Cut them off before they hit island 30. Those two are top shelf, gotta be worth a fortune. The ringleader, grinning like a wolf, eyed them down. Hey, boss, that guy, he looks familiar, like I saw him in the papers recently. Point one of the goons, staring at Charlotte, piped up. In the paper? You mean like a celeb or some big-shot noble? The boss, caught off guard, swiveled his head toward the guy. Nah, not sure. Just a quick glance, didn't really read it. The guy scratched his head, still unsure, smack, the boss backhanded him upside the head. If you don't know, you don't know. They're getting away. Noble or not, I'm hog-tying them. And that woman? I'm gonna enjoy her first, then sell her off. He followed that with another creepy grin. Meanwhile, the rest of their crew crept along in the shadows. Charlotte was onto them the whole time, though, he'd decided Elena needed a taste of the real world, the dangerous kind. Hold it right there. Just as Elena and Charlotte were strolling along the island's edge, 7 or 8 bruisers burst from the trees, armed with weapons, ropes, and nets. Charlotte raised an eyebrow. He wasn't about to jump in yet, Elena needed to feel the heat. Boss. Trouble. It's those fat dog guys. They're trying to poach our score. The guys in the shadows panicked. They'd finally found some prime merchandise, and now these bottom feeders were trying to steal it. Hold up. Just as his partner was getting worked up, 2 more groups jumped out, surrounding Charlotte and Elena, but they weren't focused on the duo. They were glaring at the first group that had made a move. Seeing 3 groups already in play, the other vultures circling Charlotte and Elena couldn't stay put any longer. Everybody freeze. We spotted these 2 first. 4 or 5 more gangs piled in. Now Charlotte and Elena were completely boxed in. Charlotte did a quick head count. Wow, at least 8 different bands of slavers prowling around Island 1. The Chambord Islands sure had a thriving human trafficking scene. So many creeps. Elena, though, instinctively shrank behind Charlotte, wide-eyed. Charlotte was surprised. He'd thought she was fearless, but turns out she had her moments. Now it was Charlotte's turn to step up. Yo, fat dogs. Sam's slave-catching crew has been tracking these 2 since dawn. Beat it. A thug in a cheap suit waved a snub-nosed pistol, sneering at the fat dogs. Heh heh. Sam. Playing territorial now, huh? We were here first. What, you think you're all that? Get outta here. Fat dog's been watching them for hours. Unless you want trouble, scram. Fat dog scoffed at everyone. Even with 50 guys breathing down his neck, he didn't flinch. Because he had muscle of his own. Yeah, fat dog. Kick their asses, boss. Winner takes the slaves. Fat dog's crew chimed in, trying to amp him up. After a minute, Fat dog waved his hand for silence. Too late to back down now. Fat dog grinned at the 7 crews surrounding him, and those 7 crews eyed each other nervously, nobody willing to make the first move. Hey! What's with you, fat dog? Don't think you can run this island just 'cause you're buddies with the auction house. I ain't scared of you. You want a piece? Come get some. Crow, a greasy dude wielding a meat cleaver, shouted defiantly. Yeah. Get boss. Damn. Haven't seen blood in days. Let's paint the town red. Crow's crew yelled, and suddenly the 2 gangs were in each other's faces, trading insults. Meanwhile, Charlotte and Elena were completely ignored. Charlotte was speechless. Slave catchers squabbling over turf. He couldn't help but think the pirate world was going downhill. Elena had been hiding behind Charlotte, scared stiff, but as the gang started screaming at each other, she seemed to perk up, watching with curiosity. She'd never seen anything like this in her sheltered life, and she was suddenly fascinated. Charlotte, though, was getting a bad feeling, watching Elena enjoy the show. Why weren't these goons following the script? Charlotte felt like he'd stepped in something nasty. Yeah. Say that again, I dare you. What? Say what? Woof woof. You wanna go? Kiss my grits. With over 40 guys in a circle, just yelling at each other, Charlotte's frustration reached its boiling point. Shut up. A wave of pure rage exploded from Charlotte. It hit everyone around him like a tidal wave. This wasn't conqueror's hockey. It was raw, unadulterated bloodlust. Elena, who'd been enjoying the show, jumped at Charlotte's roar. The intensity on Charlotte's face was something she'd never seen before, and it startled her. And the 7 groups of slavers all flinched. 2, they turned pale, then, seeing that Charlotte didn't follow through, started to recover their nerve. They cursed him inwardly. How could they have been spooked by some kid? All right, punk, say one more word. Crow, looking for a way to save face, pointed at Charlotte and sneered, but as soon as he raised his hand, a flash of green light sliced through the air. Crow felt a sudden chill in his wrist, followed by searing pain. Aya-wa. Aya-ya. My hand. My hand. Crow stared in disbelief at his severed hand on the ground, howling in agony, and a green sword appeared in Charlotte's hand. Everyone gasped at the sudden attack. Where had that sword come from? But after the shock wore off, their eyes locked onto Charlotte's 7-star sword. The emerald blade was etched with runes, radiating an uncanny aura. Nobody cared about Crow's severed hand. They were all fixated on the 7-star sword in Charlotte's grip. It looked like a legendary blade, worth a fortune, way more than a couple of slaves. Even the cheapest named swords went for tens of millions of berries, and the really famous ones could fetch hundreds of millions, even be priceless. Kid. Hand over that sword, and I'll let you walk away. I guarantee your safety. Fat Dog's eyes gleamed as he stared at the 7-star sword. Chapter 99 Chambord Island's Auction House. You are listening at novelfull.audio. With their experience working for the auction house, the slave hunters knew a quality blade when they saw one. This sword was something special. Charlotte just smirked at them. He wasn't about to waste words. You're dead. That's all he said. Then, before they knew it, a shockwave ripped through the air around them. They vanished. The onlookers were stunned, but before they could even speak, they felt a chill, then a sharp pain. Fat Dog, especially, seemed to see his own body. Then, darkness. A split second later, Charlotte was back where he started. The 40-plus members of the hunting team stood frozen. Charlotte took a deep breath. Ah! The anger inside him began to subside. Then, one by one, the standing bodies crashed to the ground. Bang! 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 The sound of bodies hitting the floor echoed. Every last one of them, head separated from torso. Oh! Elena gasped, covering her mouth. She stared at Charlotte, fear in her eyes. These people, so full of life just moments ago, now butchered. You killed them. Elena's voice was muffled, still in shock. Charlotte rolled his eyes. This woman was clueless. They were slavers. You'd rather let them live to hurt others. Charlotte's tone was flat. Elena fell silent. She had seen the way they looked at her, full of leering and lust, but still. Charlotte had just slaughtered them all. She wasn't sure she could accept that. If Charlotte could hear her thoughts, he'd probably smack himself. What had he gotten himself into, bringing back Mother Teresa? Come on. You wanted to see the Chambord Islands, right? Let me show you the real Chambord Islands. Charlotte grabbed Elena's hand and started pulling her toward the center of island. #1. Elena didn't resist, just let him lead her. As Charlotte held her hand, he couldn't help but skim through her thoughts. He instantly regretted it. How did he get stuck with this woman? Too late now, though. He was stuck with her, like it or not. They soon arrived at a tall building. Elena looked up, childcare auction house. An auction? Why had Charlotte brought her here? She didn't ask, though. She figured he had his reasons. Let's go. I'm going to show you the real darkness. Charlotte pulled her inside. No one stopped them. Charlotte's demeanor and clothes made the doorman assume he was just some rich kid bringing his girlfriend for a bit of fun. Elena looked around, taking it all in. It was all so new to her, she couldn't help but glance around, but those glances drew the attention of some of the other patrons, who looked at her with disdain. First time this hick's ever been inside an auction house. A voice sneered. Charlotte and Elena turned to see who it was. Charlotte was wondering who was looking for a beating. Elena just glared. They saw a fat man, dripping in jewels and wearing clothes that were too fancy for him. When the fat man got a good look at Elena, his eyes widened. He stared at her, drooling, practically fawning over her. Elena was about to say something when the fat man's expression changed on a dime. My dear. I wonder if I might have the pleasure of knowing your name. I am Duke Clayton of the Sukan Kingdom, and I must make the acquaintance of such a beautiful lady. Watching the fat man's complete about-face, Elena found herself speechless. Charlotte just stared at Duke Clayton in disbelief. He was really going to hit on his girl, right in front of him. Like he wasn't even there. Before Elena could even open her mouth, Charlotte stepped in front of her. Sorry, pal. You're too late. She's with me. Charlotte looked down at the short, tubby Duke, who barely came up to his chest. He ignored the Duke's outstretched hand. Clayton looked up, staring blankly at Charlotte's face, which he didn't recognize, but then he just got angrier, seeing how good-looking Charlotte was. Who are you, kid? What kingdom are you from? Clayton assumed Charlotte was some noble from another land and didn't start a fight. You don't need to know what kingdom I'm from. She's my woman. Without giving Elena a chance to react, Charlotte pulled her close, wrapping his arm around her. Elena stiffened in his embrace, staring up at him in shock. Clayton's jealousy flared, seeing the beautiful woman in Charlotte's arms, but he held back, glancing around. The power behind this auction house was nothing to sneeze at. Rumor had it the celestial dragons were involved, and he wasn't about to mess with them. Humph! Duke Clayton scoffed and turned away. Charlotte was a little surprised. He thought all the nobles in this world were arrogant snobs, sticking their noses in the air and acting like they owned the place. Why was this one so different? Whatever. Not his problem. A steward from the auction house had seen what was going on and quickly approached. Young master. The auction is about to begin. Please, follow me. A woman in a barely there outfit walked over, her chest on full display. Charlotte felt a little dizzy. Elena saw this and pinched Charlotte's side, hard. Ow! Charlotte yelped and looked at Elena, surprised. Where had she learned that move? Or was it just a woman thing? The waitress just smiled and led Charlotte and Elena to the second row of seats. The first row was empty. Charlotte remembered that the first row was reserved for the celestial dragons. Looks like none of them were attending today's auction. Charlotte was a little disappointed. He kind of wanted to take out a few celestial dragons, just for kicks, like in those stories he'd read. Oh well. Seeing Charlotte sigh, Elena frowned. What's wrong? What are you sighing about? Elena asked. Nothing. I just feel like this auction's missing something. It's making me a little grumpy. Charlotte shrugged. Missing what? Elena was curious. Charlotte just gave her a blank look. Why was she so nosy? You're better off not knowing, Charlotte said, brushing her off. Chapter 100. I beg you. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Humph! Ileana scoffed after hearing Charlotte's words, clearly disliking Charlotte. Just as Charlotte and Elena were chatting, the auction officially began. Charlotte frowned. See anything you like? Just shout it out. Charlotte told Elena, playing the part of a big spender. This cheered Elena up a bit. She started paying attention to the auction, planning to get Charlotte to spend a fortune. Charlotte, however, never intended to pay a dime. He's a pirate, lucky if he doesn't steal anything. Asking him for money is a joke. Charlotte was ready to cause some trouble. 1 million berries. 1,000,000 berries, Elena gulped, listening to the extravagant bids. She wondered if Charlotte had that much cash. Hey! Don't worry about the money. Just bid, I'll cover it, Charlotte said, noticing Elena's nervousness. You promise? Elena asked hesitantly, then she stood up. 1,000,000 berries, Elena's voice echoed through the audience, drawing everyone's attention. Ileana blushed under the gazes of hundreds of eyes, feeling a wave of social anxiety. Charlotte winced at the exorbitant price of 50,000,000 berries. Even if he wasn't planning on paying, the price was shocking. 50,000,000 berries was a month's salary, and Elena was spending it on a necklace. This spendthrift, he thought, I'll have to teach her a lesson when we get back to Hive Island. He was thinking she needed to understand the value of $1. After the announcement, the room quieted. After a few seconds of silence, the auctioneer began the countdown. 3, 2, 1. Congratulations to the lady on winning the deep-sea necklace. Elena felt like she just snapped out of a trance. She cautiously glanced at Charlotte and was relieved to see no reaction. After the auction, Elena seemed quieter. Realizing she'd spent 50,000,000 berries on a necklace, she decided not to buy anything else. Ding, ding, ding. Ladies and gentlemen. The next item is the one you've all been waiting for, slaves. Let the auction begin. The host announced. The sound of chains echoed in the background. A scarred man was dragged onto the stage. He looked around blankly, like a broken dog. Despite his injuries, his face was clean, prepped to fetch a good price, highlighting his handsomeness. Many women in the back row, near Charlotte and Elena, gasped, making Elena realize the situation. Charlotte, unfazed, watched with indifference, having hardened his heart to such things. Charlotte. Can people really be treated like commodities? Elena asked, her worldview shattered. What did you expect? Who do you think surrounded us earlier? Slave traders looking to grab newcomers who land on the Sabaody archipelago. Charlotte replied, annoyed. Why? Does the Marines not care? Elena asked, trembling. Charlotte scoffed. Why would the Marines care? Or dare to care? They're holding an auction house right next to the Marine headquarters, openly trading slaves. Do you think they'd do that without the Navy or world government's backing? Charlotte's words struck Elena hard. She watched the noisy crowd as a bloated woman bought the man for 380,000,000 berries, feeling a pang of sorrow. Charlotte. Can you save them? They're so pitiful, Elena pleaded. Save them? Are you kidding? We're right under the Navy headquarters' nose. If I make a move, an admiral could be here in an hour. What then? Charlotte asked. Elena was speechless. She couldn't let Charlotte get arrested by an admiral just to save them. Seeing Elena's distress, Charlotte chuckled. Ha ha ha. Elena pinched Charlotte's waist. Laugh. What's so funny? They're people, Elena said, confused. People? That's rich. They stopped being people the moment they were captured. Now they're just commodities with price tags, stripped of all freedom. Charlotte said mockingly. Tears welled up in Elena's eyes. What an idiot, Charlotte thought, shaking his head. Elena saw the next person being dragged out, a little girl who looked no older than 8 or 9. Kids her age should be happy under their parents' care, but she was chained, staring blankly at the ceiling, as if its colors could bring some light to her. Elena couldn't take it anymore. Charlotte. Please, save her. Just save her. I'll do anything you say, please. Elena knew Charlotte was her only hope. Charlotte looked at the tearful girl beside him. Are you sure? He asked. Elena nodded firmly. Yes. Save them, and I'll never go against you again. I'll do whatever you say from now on. Elena clung to Charlotte's arm. Ugh, Charlotte sighed. Fine, I'll indulge her this once. I was going to cause a scene anyway. Charlotte stood up, drawing attention, sitting as he was in the second row. Even the auctioneer looked up in surprise but didn't think much of it. Charlotte walked out of the auditorium and approached the auction stage.